and our players across the league are too often the targets. This is not something any player in this league should have to tolerate.
Do you think Caitlin's being used as a pawn? Caitlin didn't bring racism to the WNBA. This has been happening. And that, I think, is what's been such a shock for.
You know, it feels like everyone's been completely blindsided by what's going on. But honestly, if you've been paying attention, this moment was almost destined to happen. Everything reached a tipping point right here. And trust me, you'll want to watch all the way through to see why the Indiana Fever are on the edge of making some game-changing moves. The team just dropped a series of major announcements, including a bombshell about their faces as McCree superstar Caitlin Clark that's sending shockwaves across the league. And just when you think it couldn't get more intense, the legendary Sue Bird stepped up and didn't hold back, exposing the deep-seated racism she's witnessed in the WNBA. Let's be real, this was way overdue. Think about it, countless legends, MVPs, and gold medalists have silently battled similar struggles throughout their careers. Yet, almost out of nowhere, someone finally found the courage to speak the unfiltered truth. And Sue Bird, she didn't mince words. She came out swinging with a fiery honesty that you can't ignore. The response from the Indiana Fever organization, immediate, powerful, and potentially transformative for the franchise. But before we dive into exactly what they did,
there is one thing I want to reset, that we want to reset, and it's the language being used around fans. Fever fans, Caitlin fans, new fans. That actually has to.
And here's the part that's absolutely jaw-dropping. Sue Bird, with so much at stake, didn't hesitate for a second to go all in during a raw, no-holds-barred podcast conversation with none other than Megan Rapinoe. This was a huge gamble, potentially career-shaking, but she went for it anyway. On that podcast, she asked the tough, uncomfortable questions head-on. She wanted answers. Why was Caitlin Clark being subjected to such relentless racial hostility? Why were her groundbreaking achievements, record-smashing stats, and massive influence being completely ignored? And just when you think it couldn't get more intense, Bird dropped something even more. Shocking, subtle, but undeniable hints pointing to the very real possibility of a league-wide system actively working against Caitlin. Pause for a second and let that sink in.
Did you, when you went and kind of swatted at Caitlin, did you intend to hit her in the eye? And if so, could you just, or if not, either way, could you talk about what happened on that play?
I don't even know why I would intend to hit anybody in the eye. That doesn't even make sense to me. But no, I didn't. I didn't know I hit her, actually. I was trying to make a play on the ball, and I guess I followed through and I hit her. So obviously it's never intentional. That's not even like the type of player that I am. So yeah.
Did you and Marina kind of laugh about it afterwards? It looked like there was later on in the game they caught you guys laughing about it.
No, I just told you I didn't even know I hit her. So I can't laugh about something I didn't know happened.
So, where did everything really start to explode? It all began when Dejounai Carrington was being grilled by journalist Christine after a game about what, at first glance, seemed like a completely routine incident. Now, I know what you're thinking. You'd probably assume it was just another standard post-game question. Athletes face inquiries about all sorts of controversies, on-court incidents, and tricky situations every single day. But this time, things took a sudden, sharp turn, and it went downhill fast. Megan Rapinoe, with her trademark razor-sharp insight, immediately called it out. While the question might have looked harmless on the surface, its wording carried a deeply troubling offense, racial undertone. Just like that, a completely new and incredibly important perspective hit the conversation, flipping the entire narrative on its head.
Honestly, hearing it initially, my visceral reaction was like, that's not good. That doesn't feel good. That feels racist, to be honest.
Let's be completely honest here. The situation had a distinctly racist undertone, and everyone could feel it. Sue Bird, being the fearless leader she is, refused to let this moment slide without stepping in. She didn't hold back. She didn't just critique. She outright called out the media, specifically taking ESPN to task for sensationalizing and twisting the story into something far more explosive than it actually was. Her message was crystal clear. The original question might not have been overtly racist, but the way it was framed and presented That, my friends, was deeply problematic. Sue broke it down with precision. Athletes of color consistently face far more scrutiny and is sectored now. Harsher criticism than their white counterparts. Think about it, when a black athlete finds themselves in a similar situation, what happens? It doesn't stay contained. It escalates into a major controversy, often racialized, and blown completely out of proportion. It's a glaring double standard, one that cannot and should not be ignored.
Disagree with you on Christine Brennan's question being dickish, or maybe she shouldn't have answered it, because it was something that was out there that everybody was talking about. And so she asked the question, and it was a great opportunity for Carrington to, on the record, say, no, I didn't do it. And that's all that happened. So I do disagree with you. I don't think it was a dickish question. I think it was a fine question based on what was going on at the moment.
Sue, ever sharp and observant, immediately connected the dots, pointing out that this wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a much larger, deeply rooted pattern, and she made this observation while still barely getting started. On her end, journalist Christine didn't hold back either, boldly calling out both the WNBA and the gun media for their failure to manage the situation and, in some ways, for actively letting these harmful rumors spread unchecked, even if that wasn't her original intention. Now, here's where Sue's perspective really lands hard. She's convinced that if DeJohnai Carrington had been a white athlete, this entire episode would have barely registered, likely fading away without much notice. But, and this is key, if a white player were in Carrington's exact shoes, the narrative would have been fully amplified, dissected from every possible angle, and presented with a detailed, emotionally charged story crafted to perfection. The double standard couldn't be more obvious.
Led to the Twitter trolls and bots taking over. And what started there was this narrative of petty, jealous players hating on Caitlyn. That's really what happened. That's where it started. That we must just dislike her, that we look at her side-eyed, that we don't want her to come in the WNBA and be successful, that we're hating on her, right? So we're petty.
In the immediate aftermath, it was like a full-blown Twitter storm had erupted. Bots, trolls, and toxic narratives flooding the feeds everywhere. And it all started from this unbelievably flimsy but persistent story suggesting that petty, jealous fans were simply hating on Caitlin Clark. That, in a nutshell, is exactly how it unfolded. The narrative spun this insidious tale that we don't like her, can't see things from her perspective, don't want her to succeed in the WNBA, and are driven purely by envy. Essentially, the message boiled down to, we're petty and jealous. Here's where it gets even crazier. Sue Bird carefully broke down how a single, seemingly harmless comment from none other than Diana Taurasi, the legend herself, became the spark that set this entire narrative ablaze. One casual statement, yet its ripple effects were explosive, igniting chaos across the league. Sue, as the voice of reason, had no choice but to step in and methodically unpack exactly what was happening. And this time, the fallout was far more intense and destructive than anyone could have imagined. When Sue said things got ugly, she wasn't just talking about the usual rough and tumble, on-court clashes. No, she meant the moment the conversation stopped being about basketball entirely, when blatant hate speech began creeping in, when fans start getting enraged over issues that go far beyond the game itself, racism, deep-seated privilege, and every other ugly reality you can think of. That's when it becomes clear a line has been crossed.
I think anybody was playing dirty against Caitlyn. Not at any point did I think Caitlyn was targeted. And I'm going to stop on that word, because what happened was these petty jealousy narratives that got formed. Then when the season started and people saw people blocking Caitlyn's shot or picking her up full court, it then became, oh, they're targeting her.
Oh, they're fine. And then Sue Bird dropped another bombshell. She revealed that Caitlin Clark was dealing with far more than just the usual elbows and trash talk. This was on a completely different level. We're not talking about symbolic jabs here. Caitlin was literally dodging real hits. On top of that, she carried the constant pressure of being on guard for threats that went far beyond standard. opposing team strategies every time she stepped on the court. This was anything but fair play. Some players were actively mocking her with malicious intent. Sue made it absolutely clear this wasn't just about playing strong defense. The standard, rough and tumble of a WNBA game paled in comparison to the sheer vitriol aimed at Caitlin. This was personal, it was targeted, and it was nasty. Most importantly, Sue didn't shy away from the racial dimension of the situation. She explained that Caitlin's struggles weren't simply about the attention she was receiving or why she seemed to be promoted over others. It was a volatile mix, racism, privilege, and the frustration some players of color felt, viewing her success as symbolic of a much larger issue overshadowing her actual basketball talent. Sue didn't hold back. This wasn't just a sports issue anymore. It had become a glaring reflection of systemic racism in the league, boiling over in real time with Caitlin Clark tragically caught in place, the brutal center of it all.
That it is right now, like it's popping right now, and just being able to know that, like, I'm happy where I'm happy to see all the girls being able to pop it and look cute on the runway and being able to continue that. Because
now, shifting focus, some of the league's most outspoken critics, Angel Reese and Alyssa Thomas, have been fiercely claiming that Caitlin Clark is essentially benefiting from the white girl pass. They haven't held back at all. In fact, they've been extremely public with their criticisms, even going so far as to accuse Caitlin and her fan base of underlying racial bias. Sue Bird, in her trademark blunt and candid fashion, didn't shy away from addressing Angel, Reese, and Alyssa Thomas. It was almost as if she'd been sitting on this insight for far too long, and finally, it was time to lay it all out. Let's be clear, Angel Reese, ever since her breakout years at LSU, has been outspoken, confident, and unafraid to voice her opinions. Alyssa Thomas, on the other hand, is a cornerstone for the Connecticut Sun, a player with undeniable influence and credibility. Both of these elite athletes argue that Caitlin Clark has become, in their eyes, the poster child for white privilege in the WNBA. Their claim that she's receiving special treatment not because of her extraordinary talent, but simply because of her race. It's a heavy accusation, one that has sparked intense debate and set the league ablaze with discussion.
All of what I've said led to this group of people being able to push those racist agendas, which really has been, in my opinion, the cause of all of this. And everybody from this moment on has, not everybody, but a lot of people have been operating under the assumption that these narratives, particularly the targeting narrative, is true.
But what about Sue's response to these harsh accusations? Let me tell you, she wasn't about to stay silent. Sue Bird made it her mission to use every ounce of her influence to show, without a doubt, that the white privilege narrative was not only deeply misguided, but completely standalone, false, and it needed to be dismissed immediately. This isn't the reality, she declared boldly, her conviction unmistakable. From her perspective, what Angel Reese and Alyssa Thomas were doing wasn't just ethically questionable, it was actively harmful to the league and its players. Sue saw their approach as tearing down the game and its athletes rather than lifting anyone up.
Racism has been impacting the WNBA well before this year. This is not a new
for
thing.
sure.
This is, and in that way, I do think Caitlin's being used as a pawn. Caitlin didn't bring racism to the WNBA. This has been happening. And that, I think, is what's been such a shock for all of us, that other people are surprised by this.
Here's the heart of Sue Bird's perspective, her unfiltered take on the entire situation. In essence, she was saying that yes, Caitlin Clark is receiving a massive amount of attention, but let's be clear, it's not simply because she's white. It's because she's an extraordinary, once-in-a-generation talent. Bird is convinced that this whole controversy has been twisted and exaggerated, blown into a narrative that barely resembles reality. With her trademark sharp insight and steadfast integrity, Sue refused to let Angel Reese and Alyssa Thomas distort or sensationalize what's actually happening, especially with Caitlin already under such intense scrutiny. Let's be honest, Bird herself rose quickly through the ranks, and anyone who watches her play can see the sheer magnitude of her talent and impact. Caitlin Clark doesn't just deserve attention, she earns it.
She's obviously doing amazing. Her game speaks for itself. I think my favorite part is just women's basketball, women's sports really, but women's basketball has been on the rise. And it's kind of like what Magic and Bird was to men's basketball. Like this moment, we kind of needed something.
This is
to
that
just
moment.
And Caitlin's that moment. And I think a lot of it has to do with her logo.
Now get ready for one of the most jaw-dropping revelations yet. Sue Bird revealed that she's actually had personal conversations with Caitlin Clark, truly getting to know her and understanding her journey firsthand. And what does that mean for the whole white privilege narrative that Angel Reese and Alyssa Thomas have been pushing so aggressively? It completely dismantles it. Sue made it crystal clear. Caitlin is not some athlete who magically gets advantages because of her skin color. Like every other top player, she has worked tirelessly, grinding day in and day out, earning her rise through sheer talent, effort, and determination. Bird, fearless as ever, openly admits that this situation is far more complicated and nuanced than most people realize, and the divisive narrative being pushed has to be called out and removed. Sure, it's easy to dismiss critics or the fan base when confronted with tough questions in 40 for Us interviews, but here's the reality. The problem isn't the majority of Caitlin's supporters, it's a toxic subset. A small, harmful segment of the Fever fan base is actively promoting hate speech, pushing racial agendas, and stirring division online. On the surface, they appear to be fans, but their intentions are anything but genuine. At this point, things have escalated dangerously. Sue insists that the racial issue has been cynically weaponized, giving some players a pretext to mistreat Caitlin verbally and W2W2 physically right on the court. It's no longer just about strategy or competition. Personal grievances, jealousy, and even racism are being used as excuses to target her. Caitlin is not only enduring relentless verbal attacks, but also deliberate roughhousing, elbowing, and other overly aggressive plays. Take Lady Carter's cheap shot. For example, everyone saw it was more than a basketball play. Sue doesn't hold back. The weaponization of this racial debate benefits nobody. She argues that players like Reese and Thomas are only escalating an already volatile situation, using the court as a stage for their own grievances instead of genuinely addressing the real systemic racial issues that exist within the league. To be perfectly clear, Sue Bird is not saying that discussions about race shouldn't happen. Far from it. What she's passionately arguing is that the current approach is completely misguided. Instead of building unity, what's happening to Caitlin Clark is only driving deeper divisions. So the big question now, how will the Indiana Fever respond to this unprecedented situation? This kind of discord is not what true Fever supporters stand for, it's not what the Wnba represents, and it certainly doesn't reflect the values of the organization. Right now, the team is at a pivotal, thrilling moment. But what's next? How do they climb from 6th place into the top 4 seeds? Honestly, none of us were fully prepared for the intensity that lay ahead. Caitlin, of course, is a phenomenal player, and we all expected her to make an opposite win, immediate impact. But like any rookie entering the world's best league, it would take time to fully adjust. And adjust she did, then some. Caitlin is fiercely competitive, driven to win every drill, every play, no matter how small. That relentless determination pushes her toward unmatched greatness. This past year, she achieved milestones that clearly placed her in elite territory. Her game elevates everyone around her through playmaking, skill, and sheer presence on the pens. Court. In fact, she surpassed all expectations. Honestly, none of us fully grasped the scale of her influence until we saw it unfold in real time. Now the question turns to the team itself. What are the next steps? The Fever are on the brink of a massive transformation. Details are still emerging, but the front office is already making bold moves. With Amber Cox officially on board, nobody is untouchable. Kelly Krauskopf has been Pro Temptena, reinstated as president of basketball and business operations, and a new general manager has been appointed. This powerful front office is preparing to make sweeping changes as the Fursil roster evolves through the offseason. Caitlin will lose some close teammates in the process, but critically, she will also see changes she's wanted, including the departure of head coach Christy Sides. That's right, this winter, the Deceive Fever will reshape their organization, refining the roster and leadership to chart a new path forward. By the time the 2025 season tips off, the Indiana Fever will be dramatically different, strategically rebuilt around Caitlin Clark's extraordinary talent, ready to compete fiercely for a top spot. The question is, Are you ready to witness this transformation firsthand?